Hopefully this works this time. I think the thing's on a 60-second delay. But tonight we're going to discuss the final last class of JLI for this course. Judaism's gift to the world, time to improve. I'm not used to the silence, used to having a crowd, but I think the lesson is very, very powerful, and the lesson is very, very telling. And if you would like to follow the slideshow, you can go to myjli.com/gifts and choose lesson 6. I'll post a link one more time in the chat. So you guys can follow the chat once again. Like I said before, we're going to talk about Judaism's vision of the present, and we're going to talk about Judaism's vision for the future. And now with the coronavirus going around, this is something that is very, very appropriate in our modern time. Let me just make sure my video is working properly so we can... okay. You know, for the first few weeks, we spoke about the fact that the Torah talks about our ability to think of our neighbor in a divine image, and we spoke about our task to give charity, and we spoke about how we have to have social responsibility, and we spoke about the need to take a day off. But all of these come from a thought that in reality, society is supposed to get better. I mean, we take it for granted, excuse me, we take it for granted that society is supposed to progress and get better. And that's one of the reasons maybe we can argue that we're so surprised with this coronavirus going around, because everyone's like, what are you talking about? We're supposed to live in a safe society where everything's okay, and all of a sudden we're blindsided by this disease that has really ruined the stability that we think we have. But the fact that we think that we're supposed to have stability, the fact that we think that today is supposed to be better than it was yesterday, and we look back at our parents' generation, we speak about the Spanish flu from 1918, and we think to ourselves, oh, that was 100 years ago. That can't happen today. Why can't it happen today? That expectation that today is supposed to be better than yesterday, and tomorrow will be better than today. So to talk of global warming, that we have to save the planet for our children and our grandchildren, that whole concept that tomorrow should be better than today, that is a gift that Judaism is given to the world. So usually students read along with me. I don't usually read entire text, but being that I'm not sure if you have the book with you, I'm going to read all the text. So text number 1. This is slide 1 if you're following in our slideshow. Like I said, myjli.com/gift, lesson 6. Please follow along the slideshow. Thomas Cahill wrote a book. We have it here in the synagogue. One of the few books that people have borrowed and returned. It says like this. In his book called The Gift of the Jews, he says, all evidence points to there have been, in the earliest religious thought, a vision of the cosmos that was profoundly cynical. The assumptions that early man made about the world were, in all their essentials, little different from the assumptions that later and more sophisticated societies like Greece and India would make in a more elaborate manner. As Henry Charles Puech said of Greek thought in the seminal Man and Time, quote, no event is unique. Nothing is enacted, but once every event has been enacted, is enacted, and will be enacted perpetually. The same individuals have appeared, appear, and will appear at every turn of the circle. The Jews were the first people to break out of the circle, to find a new way of thinking and experiencing, a new way of understanding and feeling the world. So much so that it may be said with some justice that theirs is the only new idea that human beings have ever had. But their worldview has become so much part of us that at this time it might as well been written in ourselves as a genetic code. This means ancient civilizations They believe that things just happen on a circular way, meaning whatever happened yesterday is going to happen again tomorrow in some other form, that we can't break the cycle. And this showed up in their belief in nature and their belief also in themselves. So that means if you were born into a higher society, then the cycle continues and you're a higher society. If you're born into a lower society, then you're born into a lower society, and you can't break that cycle. Today we have this talk of breaking the glass ceiling. Today we have this talk of the American dream, everyone having a greater tomorrow. But ancient societies didn't believe this way. In fact, the ancient society saw nature as a god. Their gods, if you think about it, they worshipped nature as a god. So if nature is cyclical and the god is cyclical, certainly mankind, who was the subject of their ancient gods, certainly was subject to the cycle. So if it was good, it was good. If it was bad, it was bad. We're now this week finishing the book of Exodus, where Moses tells Pharaoh that nature is not a god unto its own, that there is no such thing as this power of nature, this power of cycle that cannot be unbroken. And so ingrained is Pharaoh and the Egyptians in that belief that it takes 10 plagues and the splitting of the sea to break that thinking. So a lot of people have this belief that time is cyclical, that everything just keeps happening over and over again, and you can't escape fate. That's just what it is. It's just history just repeats itself. Sickness, war, good times, it's just cyclical, and you throw your hands up and give up to the big man upstairs because there's nothing we can do about it. Torah does not think about that. Torah thinks about time in a linear way. That means when we look at the Torah, we look at the first story, the story of Adam, and how the world was back then, and we see the world progressing, the world getting better. And we're going to look back today. I know it's hard to see it because there's so much craziness outside. And I'm standing here in my office all by myself, talking to a camera. And it's very, very eerie. And we think, oh, the world's not getting better. The world's getting worse. But I'm going to show you today that there's no reason to panic and there's reason to have faith, because the world is getting better. The Torah does believe, and this is what Judaism has taught to the world, that we have the power to change from bad to good. Nature is a powerful force, but we can change nature. We can go above it. Text number 2. So if you have the textbook, it's page 185. Jonathan Sacks, Chief Rabbi of England, former Chief Rabbi of England, said, there is acceptance in Judaism. We call this tzedakah. We read it by funeral. Coming to terms with suffering and loss, saying that all God does is for the best. But Jewish law asks us to accept only that which cannot be changed. And there is no evil in the future that cannot be changed. That's why we pray. People are sick now. We're praying for their recovery. We don't say it's up to fate. We believe that the future can be changed. The significance is fundamental, continues Jonathan Sacks. The great literacy genre of ancient Greece was tragedy. And tragedy is born in the idea that there is fate that is inescapable. Man struggles against it and is almost doomed to failure. Tragedy is in the Greek sense, is a concept that simply cannot be translated into biblical Hebrew. Not only is there no such word that cannot be, for in Judaism, there is no fate that is inevitable. There is no Hebrew word for tragedy. Ours is an age of Eastern and New Age mysticism and therapies of various kinds. Mysticism is a way of accepting the world by rising above it. Therapy is a way of accepting myself as I am. Both are ways of reconciling ourselves to a world which we believe cannot be changed. And both, from a Jewish point of view, are inadequate accounts of what it means to be human. Acceptance of what it is, a failure to hear the call of what ought to be. So a lot of people are going to therapy today and running to Eastern mysticism to deal with the craziness that's going on in the world. Why go to therapy? Why seek out this mysticism? To look for sense in the craziness of the world that we think is what it is. The Rebbe, picture is behind me, taught us and taught humanity that we are not here to accept craziness and the wildness and the tragedy, we call it, of the world. Our job is to improve the world, to make the world better. We spoke about this in another course. There's no coincidence that the percentage of Jewish people that are doctors or are into social change is tremendously high. Because embedded in every Jew, passed down from Abraham all the way through all the generations, is this belief that the world is supposed to be good, that we are working day by day, year by year, in making the world a better place. That's why, if you look in the prophet Isaiah, text number 3a, page 186, 3a, it says, V'haya achas re'emen, and it will come to pass at the end of days, that they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. That means the Torah believes that in the future, times will be better. And in text number 3b, Maimonides continues, in that area, there will be neither famine nor war, neither envy nor rivalry, for there will be abundance, and all delights will be freely available as dust. The occupation of the entire world will be solely to know God. Look what Isaiah is saying over here. Now we are living in the times of Isaiah. Think about it. The entire world is united to find a cure for coronavirus. The entire planet. No one is talking about war. No one is talking about conquering other nations. Every single country, every single scientist is in a race to save lives, to prolong life, and to cure this terrible disease. That is Isaiah. Now I'm going to give you some points, some statistics that you can find online as well. In the 1960s, talking about abundance, 1.2 billion bushels of wheat were produced by 84 million acres of ground. By contrast, in 2015, 5 years ago, 2 billion bushels, 800 million more, were produced using only 55 million acres. The yield has nearly doubled, and the acreage used has been reduced by nearly a third. Says Greg Easterbrook in his book, It's Better Than It Looks. About poverty. In 1865, less than 10% of the world's population was living above the extreme poverty line. In 2015, only 10% of the world's population was living below the extreme poverty line. This is a complete reversal in only 150 years, which according to the Oxford economist Max Rosner, works out to about 130,000 people escaping poverty each day for the last 125 years. About war. This is important to hear, because we're living in a time where the news agencies are going to tell you everything is terrible. In a 50-year span, from 1500 to 1550, European countries were collectively involved in 504 years of war. In the 50-year span from 1951 to 2000, European countries were only involved in 74 collective years of war. Those who remember going in high school learning about the 100-Year War, we learn about all these terrible calamities going on. Ours is a much better time. This didn't happen on its own. The Torah tells us that the world is not a jungle. There is a boss. There is someone who controls it. And he wants us to make the world better. The world is better than it was today. And even in terrible times, when the Jews suffered through terrible times, we still believed in better times. That's why during the Holocaust, when Jews were led to the gas chambers, they sang Ani Maamin, because they said, it's true today it might be terrible, but we believe in a greater tomorrow. So where does this come from? Where does this come from that we believe in a better tomorrow? Well, this believes in the fact that we believe in the betterment of man. What does it mean to be better? What's good? What's bad? How do we judge morality? Well, today, that's the big question that's facing society. Because if I want to do something and you don't like it, that doesn't make it bad. That makes it unenjoyable to you. Sorry, my office. But we need to know that what's good and bad is good and bad. That doesn't change. There's a morality that comes from above. So I'm going to ask you a question. Think about it this way. Is it my personal belief or opinion that let's take a crime, Ted Bundy, son of Sam, Charles Manson, or pick any tremendous crime, Osama bin Laden, 9/11 attackers. Is that an opinion that what they did was wrong? Or is what they did wrong? Think about it. Everybody in the entire universe will say what they did was wrong. Now, who's to say what they did was wrong? Why do you think that's wrong? Who taught you that that's wrong? Why is that the wrongness of that event, the evil of that event, taken for granted? Because you stop and think objectively, there's certain morality that is a given. That is we'll call it an absolute morality, not subjective. It's not subjective. I want to pause for a second because some people are having trouble getting into the class. Give me one moment. Not subjective. I want to pause for a second because some people are having trouble getting into the class. I apologize. So the idea that there's absolute morality, that has to come from somewhere. If you're going to say that this activity, pick any activity you want, who you want to hurt, who you want to marry, what you want to do, and you're going to say that, what's your problem? I'm doing it. As long as you don't hurt me, then there's chaos in the world. The fact that we all can agree that certain things are wrong, that comes from a place of, we're calling it absolute morality. And that's ingrained in today's society. Ancient paganism didn't have that absolute morality. So the question for discussion on page 187, is there a difference between having behaving morally due to logic and conscience due to an absolute transcendent moral standard, does the source of our moral convictions matter? The answer has to be yes. Because there's a letter. The Rebbe was speaking to some people, and the Rebbe was in France and Germany in the 30s and early 40s. And the Rebbe said, we have to remember that Germany was not a nation of monsters, of uneducated animals, just people with no education. No, these were people who were the head of science at the time, the doctors, the lawyers, the psychologists, all the great medicine of the time was coming out of that country. So how could it be that a nation so advanced could commit such horrific acts against fellow human beings? The answer, the Rebbe continues, is when our moral standards come from logic and conscience. Logic and conscience can change. Look at what the American society has been able to tolerate 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. If I were to ask you 30 years ago, would marijuana ever be legal? You would say, what? No way. Impossible. Not going to happen. Today, things are changing. People feel differently. Judaism, Torah, has maintained a steady approach. What we decide is right and we decide is wrong doesn't come from us. Not because we feel this way. It's because there's an absolute authority. And that absolute authority, God, Hashem, has told us, you act this way to improve the society, the way, from your community and all around you. Now, if you look at Appendix A in your book has text 204. I'm going to read it for you. It's text number 13. This is a story from the Gemara. It tells us Rabbi Ruvain once spent Shabbat in Tiberias and met a Hellenist philosopher. And the Hellenist said, who is the most despised by society? Rabbi Ruvain replied, he who denies a creator. But how is he such a person despised by society? Such a person can only be said to be despised by God. Because Rabbi Ruvain replied, the Creator instructed us, honor your father and mother, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not testify falsely, do not covet. People do not deny the validity of the commandments unless they deny the underlying foundation. Rabbi Ruvain quotes the second six of the 10 commandments, all of which affect other people. Because if you don't have the number one, I am your God, then everything is subject to change. Then you can say, well, I felt this way, and therefore, I should be able to do it. Remember the Menendez brothers, late 80s in LA, right? They felt this impulse. They said the powers did this to them, and they were trying to invoke compassion and mercy because they had this terrible childhood. That whole logic was based on, well, if I have an impulse to act a certain way, then I can't be sure to control myself. But knowing that Anechi Hashem Elokecha, I am your God, there's an all-seeing eye who's watching your every move and cares, like a text 14 says, look at these three things and you will not come to sin. Know what's above you. An eye that sees, an ear that hears, and everything is being written down. Tells you that God cares about your choices, and He is interested in how we behave, and ultimately we're gonna have someone to answer to. Now, does that mean that a religious person never does a sin? Does that mean that if you believe in God, you're always going to be perfect? No, it doesn't mean that. Because ultimately, God created us with an evil inclination. And that evil inclination is going to come to us and it's going to tell us, listen here, you can still do this evil and everything's going to be okay. It won't affect your relationship with God. But the concept of teshuvah, the concept of repentance, the concept of return means that ultimately we believe that we can be better. Ultimately, we believe that our behavior should be held to a higher standard. Because if you don't believe that, then why change? Where I was yesterday, fine. I decide to be different today. That can be. This is why the Ten Commandments start off with "I am your Lord God," not because the Jewish people didn't believe in God; they believed in God. We know that already from the previous portion. The Jewish people believed in God, starting from Abraham. Abraham taught Isaac, and Isaac taught Jacob, and Jacob taught the 12 tribes, going all the way down. The Jewish people believed in God going way back. The statement, "I am God, your God," is not to tell the Jewish people that new information, I'm the boss. No, the Jewish people knew God was the boss. What God is trying to implant in all of us is that even moral laws, even laws between man and another person, are based on what God ultimately decides is moral and is not moral. So now let's ask ourselves a question. If they believed in the ancient times in pagan gods, why wasn't that enough to have a moral society? Look at 6.1, figure 6.1 on page 188. In order to have absolute morality, in order to have morality for all beings, there's three things that have to be. Number one, the exclusive authority over all existence, and therefore he's entitled to what is right and wrong. Number two, an eternity that is moral, unchanging. Doesn't make a difference, Europe, United States, Australia, South Africa. Number three, interested in the events of the universe and thus concerned with how humanity should conduct themselves. So this brings us to the differences between Hashem Echad, the one God, and the ancient gods. In the polytheistic theology, every religion and culture had multiple gods. So because they had multiple gods and each god had different standards, there was no way to have absolute morality. Because according to one god, it was moral, but according to another god, it's not. Utter chaos. Number two, we discussed in other lessons, in lesson 2, that the gods were immoral themselves, or amoral at best. So if they were immoral, then obviously the human being is going to be immoral. And number 3, we discussed also in lesson 2, that God didn't really care about the activities of man. So why should the people behave themselves if the gods are not paying attention? But Avraham, the father of Judaism, the father of morality in the world, comes into the world and tell everybody, God is the sole authority over the universe. And thus, his rules are unconditional and they're binding to everybody. Number 2, God is just. And because he's just, he has the authority to decide what is just and what is not. And number 3, God is concerned with the behavior of humanity. So like you see in the exercise 6.1 on page 189, from the story, when God comes to Avram and says, I'm going to destroy Sodom. God said to Avram, I'll read, the outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah is so great that their sin is so grievous that I will go down and see if what they had done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me, and if it is, I will destroy them. Abraham approaches God and says, will you even destroy the righteous from the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you destroy it and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people who are in it? For be it for you, far be it from you, to do such a thing like this, to kill the righteous along with the wicked, and treat the righteous like the wicked? Far be it from you. Will the judge of the entire earth not perform justice? What do we learn from here? We learn from here a few things. Number 1, that God is concerned about the activities of man. Sodom and Gomorrah were misbehaving, they were doing terrible things, and God comes and says, not okay. And God is willing to interject and intercede and stop the inhumanity. And number 2, we learn God is just. Abraham says, far be it from you to do such a thing. Will the God of justice not do justice? And number 3, we learn that God is the boss of the entire world. when Abraham said, will the judge of the entire earth not perform justice? So we learn from here that God is, one of the beliefs of Judaism is that God is the boss of the entire world. And he is expecting us to act a certain way. Now, being that this is a class, I know it's JLI, Jewish Learning Institute, and it's Judaism's gift to the world, but one of the focus we have at Chabad, based on the Rebbe's message, is that the Torah has a lesson for everybody. So if you're watching this class and you're not Jewish, there's something for you as well. There's something called the 7 Noahide laws. And these 7 laws were given to, 6 were given to Adam, the 7th was given to Noah. And in these laws are the moral ethics and morality for everyone, for all humanity. Text number 5, Maimonides writes, God commanded Adam concerning 6 matters. He forbade idolatry, blasphemy, murder, illicit sexual relations, theft, and he instructed them to establish a judiciary. To Noah, God added another prohibition, consuming a limb torn from a wild animal. Let's go through this quickly. Idolatry. You can't have a moral society if you don't believe in one God. Because the one God tells you that he's watching. There's one boss and one standard. So what's the difference if we curse God? I feel like God is thin-skinned and God's going to get offended. But the fact of the matter is, you're not going to act properly if you can't respect the higher authority. So as human beings, we have to be okay with people being above us, people having authority over us, our parents, our teachers, our mentors, and even when we're grown up, and even when we have an opinion of our own, we still have to respect them. That doesn't change. Illicit relationship, and this is one of the biggest problems we have in today's society. We're relying on the schools to teach morality. We're relying on, I don't know, TV shows, PBS to teach morality. That's a problem. You know what morality is taught? At home, around the dinner table, when the mom and the dad sit down together, and they speak to kids, and they tell them about values. So this is why illicit relationships are one of the 7, because family matters. Now I'm sure everyone is at home. Families are bonding. This is not something that should be lost. You sit down and tell your child, you say, let me tell you something that my parents taught me. Tell them what's right and tell them what's wrong. Murder, we spoke about this in lesson 3 and 4. The fact that we have to respect each person for who they are as a human being, regardless if we disagree with them. And there has to be a judiciary, because there are going to be people that misbehave, and we have to know they have to be held accountable. And this is important. And finally, we can't mistreat creatures, animals that we have the power over them. You know, I was reading on CNN that everyone's following in the Cincinnati Zoo this hippopotamus. The fact that everyone's excited that we're helping creatures less fortunate than us. And you see Appendix B on page 206. The Sefer Chinuch, the Book of Education, writes something very interesting. Although it is well known that there are 7 Noahide laws, do not allow this fact to mislead you. The truth is that these 7 laws are really general categories that each contain many detailed laws. For example, the prohibition against illicit sexual relations is a single Noahide law, but includes many details. Similarly, the prohibition against idolatry is a single Noahide law, but includes many details. The same is true against theft. So kidnapping, stealing, paying your employee on time. All these different things are all included in theft. So the role of the Jewish people is to teach the Jewish people, is to teach the world how we are supposed to behave. Like text 6a, Isaiah, going back to Isaiah, it says, "Nations shall walk by Israel's light, and the kings by the glow of their radiance." And quoting 6b from the book of Exodus, chapter 19 of Exodus, "And you shall be a kingdom of priests." The Sephorno explains, "You will be a treasure to me in the sense that you will be a kingdom of priests to guide and to teach the entire human race, to call upon the name of God and to serve Him with one service." There you go. So, what does it mean to be a Jew? To be a Jew means that our job is to have an effect, in the world. That that doesn't change. Now, some people might argue text 7 and text 8 discuss something very interesting. What have the Jewish people done for the world lately? So Maimonides writes something very interesting in text number 7. He says that Christianity and Islam, they have taken the ideas of the Jews, the ideas of the Torah, and dispersed it to the entire world. That means so many people are believing in one God, and so many people are believing in absolute morality because of this lesson taken from the Torah. The Rebbe discusses in text number 8, why have the Jewish people been more proactive? Well, unfortunately, until recently, the Jewish people spoke about lessons from the Torah. They were met by a very, very harsh and violent response. The Rebbe says, but now that we live in safe times, now's our time to go talk to people about how we should act. There's a story with David Chase saying that he was once on a boat and he asked this captain which way is east because he wants to daven Mizrach, to pray towards Jerusalem, and the people are and the captain was very, very impressed. So the people have to know that there's a standard for living, and we're expected to stay up to the standard of living. And this is a very important lesson for now also, because some people think that, you know something, that's it. Judaism has done its job. There's nothing more for Judaism to do. Look at text number 9. If you have the book, I'll read it online, page 197. Matthew Arnold once said, "As long as the world rests, all who want to make progress in righteousness will come to Israel for inspiration. As to the people who have had the sense of righteousness most glowing and strongest, far from having completed its task, it would be fairer to say that a Jewish contribution to civilization has really been more urgently needed. For the first time, we live in plural societies in which Jews have opportunity to enter public debate on free and equal terms. And for the first time since the decline and fall of ancient Greece and Rome, there's a real battle to be fought between Judaic and neo-pagan ideas of human responsibility, sexuality, the family, the sanctity of human life, the rule of law, and the objectivity of moral values, and the ethics of the market and the public square." So Rabbi Sachs is making here a very, very strong point. It's true, society has progressed, and we're very enlightened, and we know a lot. But what Torah and Judaism still has to teach everybody is that we can't take it for granted that we're going to figure it out on our own. We have to have a base for that absolute morality. So, human responsibility to each other. We didn't just figure this out. It took millennia and centuries of influence of the Torah on people. The fact that equality for women, and we have to listen to hashtag Me Too movement and all these different things. It's very, very good. But we have to understand that the foundation for all these things, equality for people, treating people ethically, ethics in markets and in business, this is something the world still has to hear from us, and saying that it's the Torah that has taught us this. I often repeat the story in which Rabbi Manish Friedman said that he's once having this conversation with somebody, and the guy said, "Well, we don't need the Torah anymore because we figured it out." So Rabbi Manish Friedman said, "Okay, tell me a command. Tell me a an activity that humanity has figured out, and we don't need the Torah anymore. So the guy says, well, easy. That you shouldn't murder. So Rabbi Friedman replies, very funny. 3,000 years after the Torah said that you shouldn't murder, you come up with this idea. It's not a good idea to murder. No. Come up with something else that humanity has figured out. The man couldn't. Because there's never been an 11th commandment. There's nothing that we can come up with that's not included in the Torah. And our mistake happens when we think that, God, we got it from here. We don't need you anymore. And you see in text number 10, there are some people who actually think this way. Not text number 10, text number 11. Norman Cantor is a well-known medievalist who has written, I am told, some excellent studies in this field. Now he has branched out to write a general history of the Jews. And he says, Cantor makes no bones about the fact that he is out to debunk, or as he more fashionably puts it, to deconstruct his predecessors, and to present what he seems to think are a number of original theses. As it happens, however, nearly all of these have been advanced long before him, and by rights from Appian in the 1st century to Arnold Toynbee in the 20th, not known for their friendliness toward the Jews. This thesis may be summarized as follows. Quote, Jewish history is now coming to an end, and the Jews are fated to vanish through assimilation and intermarriage, not only in diaspora, but in Israel too, where a new Judeo-Arab Near Eastern elite will emerge in the next century. This, though, is nothing to get upset about, for the Jews have fulfilled their role in history, and pragmatically, they are no longer very much needed as a distinct race. So you can ask yourself, and the exercise, 6.3, will the world, page 201, will the world suffer a loss if Jews, as an identifiable group in history, were to be assimilated into oblivion? Is there an idea from this course that would use to answer this question? And obviously, if you were here, I take answers. But the answer is no. We're still needed. And our job is not to be embarrassed about it. Our job is to be proud of it. That we're still here to teach the world a lesson. We're still here to teach the world what it means to live a moral life. Unfortunately, some people want to be embarrassed of the Judaism and hide the Judaism. There's a great story of this a rabbi who was walking in the Soviet Union, and one day he meets a Jewish woman, and a Jewish woman tells the rabbi that all her life she concealed her Judaism, and now for the first time her neighbors are whispering to her, making her like Yid. As she walked by, she said, what should she do? So the rabbi answered her, says, if you hadn't told me your story, I had no idea you were Jewish. You walked by, you would know you were Jewish. But I walk down the street in my yarmulke and my tzitzis. I dress openly as a Jew. So when I walk down the street, no one screams Yid at me. Why is that? So the woman thinks for a moment and says, because when they scream Yid at you, you can take it as a compliment. When they scream Yid at me, I take it as an insult. We have to look at it as we're proud. Torah is ours. We have to look at the world we accomplished, the Jewish people of Torah, as an accomplishment. The world is getting better. We are bringing Mashiach closer. And we have to add one more act of goodness, one more act of kindness. We have to try to implement the Torah and say that, and not be ashamed to say, not be bashful and say, this is what the Torah demands of us from all Jewish people. There's a certain pride we get in the land of Israel, knowing it's the Holy Land. We shouldn't be embarrassed to say it's the Holy Land. There was a story, Rabbi Sachs says that he was in a lot, and they went on a boat ride where there's a glass bottom. They could see the reef. It's beautiful. So the boat ride operator says, where are you from? So he says, oh, from England. Oh, in England there's grass, and everybody knows that England is known for its luscious greenery, and golf was invented there. I've been there, it's beautiful. But the man turns his hand, like waving over the desert, and says, but this is ours. We have to be proud to be Jewish. Never back down. Never be ashamed that the fact that what we have accomplished as a people and what we're going to continue to accomplish. The people, today's society, need to hear our voice in the belief. Everyone's panicking now. People need to hear our voice that the world is going to get better because God, the creator of the world, created the world in a way that's not cyclical. That's just going to go around and around and around. It's linear. We're going up to a better time. And many times the Jewish people compare it to the moon. The moon wanes and the moon grows. Now the moon is very small, and now it looks bad. But we know this is what the Torah has told us. It's going to get better. One last story. I always say that. There's a story. In 1958, a Hasidic rabbi moved into Kew Gardens in Queens, and he opened up a little shul, and people started coming to that little shul. And he had and he made a Passover Seder, and like many rabbis, he had a little kid, and all of a sudden the baby starts crying. So he gets up and excuses himself from the table. He takes a child and he shushes the child to sleep, puts him down, and he's singing a Yiddish lullaby to the child. By the Seder, this young man, not very religious. And he asked him, he asked the rabbi, where are you from? He says, I'm from Warsaw, and my wife and I, we survived the war, and we met again afterwards. We tried to have children. The doctors first said we couldn't, then with a miracle, with medicine, past 10 years, and we finally had this child. And now it says, tell me, what was that Yiddish lullaby you were singing? And he says, he answered in Yiddish, and I'll say it in Yiddish, and I'll translate it into English afterwards. He says, Es ist gut zu sein Yid. Es ist gut zu sein Yid. It's good to be a Jew. It's good to be a Jew. Too often, people have this attitude as schwer zu sein Yid. It's hard to be Jewish. But that's not the attitude. We got to walk with our head held high. Like the story I told, a guy was walking on the street in the 40s with a yarmulke and a hat, and someone calls out to him. He comes into the study hall and he says, he tells his friend, I was walking down the street and someone called out to me, dirty Jew. So his friend says, what do you do? He says, thank God. Thank God he knew who I was. We should never be embarrassed of who we are, of what we accomplished. And look at text 12, the last text for this course. But the Navi Sefania says, page 202, because then I'll purify the speech of all people. They will call all in the name of God. And serve him with one purpose. Like I said earlier, this is a sign of Messianic times. We are living in Messianic times. The Rebbe said Mashiach is coming in our generation. That's not pie in the sky talk. That is not some crazy idea. That is the truth. We have never been living in times such as these, where the world is focused on better. The world is focused on improving the world of life all around the world. In Africa, you're talking about the Peace Corps started by President Kennedy, and going on where knowledge is shared now for medicine between China and the United States, who are enemies. And in Israel, everyone is sharing ideas how to conquer a common enemy. What we got to do is take the messages of the Torah and take it one step further. We got to take the messages of the Torah and go to people and say, the Torah, the word Torah means guide. The guide for humanity is saying we have to do one more act of goodness, one more act of kindness, one more mitzvah. So if you're Jewish and you're a woman, you light Shabbos candles. If you're a guy, you're putting on tefillin. If you're a Gentile, you're following the laws of morality, not because you believe it right, it's because the ever-seeing guy, the God, the creator of heaven and earth, is asking you to behave a certain way. And that's the way we improve society. And if we do that, Hashem will see the way we're acting. He'll eradicate this disease. He'll eradicate all evil disease. And he'll send Mashiach speedily in our time. And we'll go back to our country, our rightful homeland, and build a temple in Jerusalem. And it won't just be a place of service for the Jewish people. It will be a place of service for humanity. Like the Rambam says, quotes, when he talks about the learning, it says, Hashem, and the world will be filled with knowledge of God, like the water covers the seas. May that day happen speedily in our days, and it will come to a time when God will wipe off the tears from all faces. We should know no more suffering, only health for everybody, and prosperity, and that's going to happen with a return to our Jewish heritage. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you all in person, where we can make a big meal of Thanksgiving to God, and we should only hear good news from our relatives all around the world.